This Day in Sports History. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more great podcasts and more info at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's May 2nd, and on this day in 1967, the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup and have not sniffed it since. The Maple Leafs are one of the original six in the NHL, and 67 was the final year of just the OG 6 teams. The league expanded to 12 teams the following season. The Leafs finished the regular season in third place. They beat the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round of the playoffs, and side note, the Blackhawks had managed to snap Muldoon's curse that year and finish atop the standings for the first time in 40 years. Nothing like a good old Chicago curse, right? But the Hawks could not carry that momentum to the finals. Montreal was the second best team in the league that year, and they beat the New York Rangers to advance to face the Leafs in the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, two old rivals going head-to-head for the Cup. The Canadiens took Game 1, Toronto won Games 2 and 3, with the third game a 3-2 double overtime thriller. The Leafs lost starting goalie Johnny Bower prior to Game 4 and went with backup Terry Sawchuk for a loss in the fourth game and a win in Game 5. Bower was healthy again for Game 6 on this night, but Punch Imlach stayed with Sawchuk between the pipes. The game was scoreless through the first period. Ronnie Ellis had been a 20-goal scorer for the Leafs in the regular season, but he had yet to find the back of the net in the finals. He managed to change that in the second period. With less than a minute to play in the period, Toronto struck again.
Up to Pappen. It's Stankowski. They're over the line to Pappen. Closing in. Pappen goes to the wing. Centered it. He goes out Stankowski. Pappen shot it, and it hit Stankowski.
Pete Stemkowski got the credit for the goal in the moment, but it was later changed to a Jim Pappen goal as the puck ricocheted off Montreal goaltender Gump Worsley. Montreal got one back in the third to make it 2-1, and then with 55 seconds left, Toe Blake pulled Gump Worsley for the extra skater in Henri Richard, but the strategy did not pay off. George Armstrong buried one in the empty net to make it 3-1. And after that, the fans at Maple Leaf Gardens happily counted down the final seconds.
13, it's a pass up for Richard, stopped by Marcel Pronovo. It's Hooker, flicking it down the ice to the blue line. 3 seconds, 2, 1, the game is over. The Toronto Maple Leafs have won the Stanley Cup.
It was the 13th time the Maple Leafs had won the Stanley Cup in their 50-year history as a franchise, their 10th since 1942 and the start of the original 6 era, and their 4th in 6 years. As fans trickled out with smiles on their faces that night, they had to believe that the next 50 years would be just as bright, maybe even brighter with a new expanded league, and yet, that was the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs celebrated with the Stanley Cup. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. On this day in 2011, the Dallas Mavericks stunned the LA Lakers. The Lakers were the two-time defending champs, taking on the Mavs in Game 1 of the Western Conference semis. It was Kobe versus Dirk. Both LA and Dallas had needed 6 games to get past their first-round matchups. Even though the Lakers were the 7th seed, there were a few believing that Kobe could will this team to a second three-peat, equaling the Bulls' run from back in the 90s. The game was tight until a 21-2 LA run in the third quarter gave the Lakers a 16-point lead behind Kobe's hot hand.
Stevenson picked off by Fisher. Bryant for 3, yes!
Dirk hadn't exactly been quiet in this one, but down double digits, he started to heat up.
7-point Laker lead. Nowitzki on a fadeaway. unguardable.
It was a classic back and forth, a whatever you can do, I can do better kind of game. Dirk hit a pair of free throws to give Dallas the lead with 20 seconds to play. A Mavs steal and a Laker foul on the next possession killed one of LA's opportunities to take the lead, and with 3.2 seconds left, the Lakers had one last shot for the win.
Passing angle here, not much size on it. But here comes Kobe. Kobe for three. Rebound is slapped by Kelly, and that's it. The Dallas Mavericks have defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in Game 1 here at Staples.
Kobe finished with 36, and it was one of the few times in his career when he failed to make the big shot. Dirk had 28 points and 14 rebounds. The Mavericks took Game 1 96-94, and Dirk said years later that stealing that first game in the waning seconds was key in giving them the confidence to go on a run after struggling a little bit against Portland in Round 1. It was the beginning of the end for Kobe and the Lakers as Dallas went on to sweep LA in 4 straight and move on to the Western Conference Finals, and we'll talk about one or two of those games in the coming weeks. On this day in 1953, it was one of the most well-known FA Cup matches. So if you are an English football fan, you're probably familiar with the FA Cup competition between English teams from the Premier League down to Level 9, with the final culminating in the FA Cup final in Wembley. And we talked about the first FA Cup at Wembley that took place in 1923 a few days ago, but the competition actually goes back to 1871. The 1953 FA Cup final is one of those that lives in lore for several reasons. It's called the Stanley and Stanley match, or the Matthews match, named for 38-year-old Stanley Matthews and his teammate Stanley Mortensen, who both figured prominently in this one. This was Blackpool versus Bolton, and 1953 was a pretty big year for folks in the UK. And still to come that year, Edmund Hillary would summit Everest with Tenzing Norgay on a British-led expedition later on in the month. And then Queen Elizabeth's coronation was on the schedule for June of that year. And the coronation actually played a little bit of a role in why this FA Cup match is so well remembered. Television sets in people's homes were becoming more and more of a thing, but many Brits had actually rented or purchased a set to specifically watch the upcoming coronation. The FA Cup match was televised, and while it wasn't the first to ever be broadcast, it was the largest audience to watch it at that point. The future queen was in attendance in the royal box to watch some incredibly poor goalkeeping. Bolton scored the first goal of the match just 90 seconds in when the Blackpool keeper let the ball go through his hands and trickle into the net. Blackpool tied it at 1 in the 35th minute, but another goalkeeper error gave Bolton the lead again in the 41st. The Wanderers were the unheralded team in this one, and they were not really thought to be a contender for the Cup, but after scoring a third in the 53rd minute, they led 3-1, and it seemed like they were on their way to the upset win. Now, one thing to keep in mind here with this era of English football, this was several years before substitutions were allowed. You started with 11, and that was it. If a player got injured, they either played through it or you played a man down. There were a few Bolton players who'd taken some knocks in the first half, and they were hobbling around in the second. So back to the Stanleys. In the 68th minute, the elder statesman Matthews connected with Mortensen for their second goal. Bolton's keeper made a complete mess of it in front of the net to allow it. With time and regulation ticking down in the final minute, Mortensen found the equalizer on a free kick. Blackpool was quickly on the attack again, with Matthews on the wing. And here's newsreel coverage of the game from that day.
The great little wizard has it again. A flick to centre finds Perry, who crashes it home into the Bolton net. Blackpool 4, Bolton 3. There's no doubt about it now. Matthews, recently ignored by the England selectors, is the man of the match. What a great reception he gets from all at Wembley as the whistle goes. Matthews, in his third cup final, is the hero of the day.
On this day in 1930, it was the first professional baseball game played under the lights. Maybe. So this has been a topic for debate for folks over the years, and it really depends on the qualifiers that you want to place on this as to which city can claim first under the lights. If you wanted to dive down into the nitty-gritty of it, the first ever official game played under artificial light happened in 1883 between Fort Wayne and Quincy College. Now, that was an amateur game played under gas lights. The first professional games played under artificial light are considered to have happened on April 28, 1930, a game in Kansas that included the Independence Producers, a Class D minor league team in Kansas, and another in Enid, Oklahoma, featuring the Kansas City Monarchs of the Negro League, were played using portable lighting systems, which leads me to what happened a few days later on this day in 1930, when the Des Moines Demons hosted the Wichita Aviators in the first night game featuring, and here's the qualifier, permanently installed artificial lighting. In most circles where this has been discussed, this is considered to be the first professional, another qualifier, night game in baseball history. So this was driven by a changing workforce and work hours. The Depression was obviously affecting work in 1930, but those who were able to find jobs started to see a shift in how the workday was structured. Henry Ford began instituting the 8-hour-a-day, 5-day work week in 1926, and that idea flourished in the 30s and officially became ingrained in the U.S. when FDR passed the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938. There were more and more people working 9-to-5 jobs, and the parks where baseball teams played, especially minor league teams, were seeing a drop-off in attendance. The Des Moines Demons owner was Lee Kaiser, and he could read the tea leaves pretty well and decided that lights were going to be needed at his ballpark if he wanted people to come out. So playing night games would allow those who were working and could afford the price of admission a chance to come out and watch the local team. Instead of the typical 600 fans, 12,000 paying customers, one of which was Baseball Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis, came out to watch the game on this night. NBC Radio broadcast a portion of the game nationally. The Demons made it even more special by beating the Aviators 13-6. Now, while this wasn't the first night game, it did have a tremendous impact. More and more minor league teams added lights to their stadiums and eventually led to the Cincinnati Reds becoming the first Major League Baseball team to add permanent lights to Crosley Field in May 1935. On this day in 1939, Lou Gehrig removed himself from the lineup, ending his consecutive game streak at 2,130. Gehrig had not missed a game in 15 years, wearing his customary number 4 and starting at first base for the New York Yankees during that time. He was the cleanup hitter in a murderer's row of sluggers. In the 1938 season, Gehrig hit .295 with 29 homers and 114 RBI, but when he reported to spring training prior to the 39 season, he was feeling weak and listless, and he couldn't work himself into his usual form. Well, here in the early part of the schedule, Gehrig was hitting only .143. On this day, Gehrig went through the same motions as he had always done, warming up, taking batting practice, and then walking the lineup to home plate as the captain of the Yankees. But his name was not on that day's lineup card. He had told manager Joe McCarthy that for the good of the team, he was removing himself from the lineup. Of course, we know now why he was feeling weak, but at this point, he had no idea of why he felt the way he did. Babe Dahlgren replaced Gehrig and responded with a double, a homer, and 3 RBI in a 22-2 Yankees rout of the Detroit Tigers. Gehrig's Ironman streak started June 1, 1925, and over that 15-season span, he hit .340 with 493 home runs and 1,976 RBI. It was not until June 19th that Gehrig would go to the doctor with his wife on his 36th birthday to learn of his ALS diagnosis, the disease that would soon bear his name. He died June 2nd, 1941. With this year's Kentucky Derby coming up tomorrow, let's go back to some notable Derby moments that happened on this day. In 1964, it was jockey Bill Hartack aboard Northern Dancer that won in then record time. Northern Dancer was the first Canadian-bred horse to win the Derby. The Bay Stallion was the second betting choice on this day behind Hill Rise. Northern Dancer edged out Hill Rise by a head to win in 2 minutes flat, truly making the Kentucky Derby the fastest 2 minutes in sports. That record stood until 1973, when Secretariat beat it. On this day in 1970, Diane Crump became the first woman to ride in the Kentucky Derby. She rode to victory in the first undercard race of the day. In the main event, Crump rode a horse named Fathom to a 15th place finish in a 17-horse field. Mike Manganello on Dust Commander won the Run for the Roses that day. But on her way to this point, Crump faced a lot of resistance and misogyny in her bid to be a professional jockey. Prior to her debut in the Derby, Diane and other female jockeys were dissuaded at every turn. Male jockeys boycotted races that female riders attempted to enter. They also faced many different forms of harassment in their quest to compete. Despite all of that, Crump continued on in her pursuit, winning a total of 225 races in her career before retiring in 1985. While a lot of the debate following the NFL draft last weekend centered around the precipitous drops of Shedeur Sanders and Quinn Ewers, I wonder if there was any debate back in 1984 about a guy selected that wasn't on anybody's draft board, and yet still got picked. In the 12th round of the '84 draft, the Dallas Cowboys selected long jumper and sprinter Carl Lewis. The list of Olympic champions playing in the NFL is a long one, and of course, drafting or adding speedy sprinters to play running back or wide receiver had been popular going back to Jim Thorpe, though typically the player selected had played the game at some point in the recent past. Lewis was drafted as a wide receiver, but here's the thing. He had never played football. He also never played for the Cowboys, but as a 12th rounder, it wasn't really a wasted pick. Interestingly enough, though, Lewis was also selected in that year's NBA draft by the Chicago Bulls in the 10th round. He never played for the Bulls either. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If you think that London or Seattle get a lot of rainy days, then you may be shocked to learn about the Carnian pluvial episode that took place about 230 million years ago. It was a period of intense rainfall that lasted somewhere between 1 million and 2 million years.
What did you say?
Geologists found evidence of this extremely rainy event in the late 70s and early 80s when they came across siliciclastic sedimentation in unexpected places, such as the Eastern Alps. The lush conditions that followed helped the dinosaurs exist for another 150 million years. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.